In the scenario where you have been asked to come in and either audit a customer's paediatric bronchoscopy equipment, then you are quite likely to be presented with a situation not dissimilar to this. Now, just going back a little bit, you may have been asked to come in and audit that set as part of their ongoing continuing professional development, or they could have used that set recently and realised that something was missing or something just didn't go to plan during the procedure. So they will have asked you in to come and have a look at their set and identify what's missing or any additions that may be required to the set to make it more usable. I hesitate to use the word safe, but that is the actual case of the matter. So you guys don't get to see this kit that often. It certainly doesn't get used that often, but this is the scenario that you could be presented. Essentially, to try and get this squared away in your own head, you've got to try and get this set into some sort of organisation. So, as before, get your bronchoscope tubes, all the little accessories to the side, and put them in length order to start with. Okay. The point being, you've then identified what lengths of bronchoscope tube they have, and therefore what telescope they may need, which optical forceps they may need. The parts that are usually missing, perversely, one is the telescope, because often these places don't keep the telescope in the same tray as the rigid bronchoscopes themselves. So your first question, if it's not there, is where's your endoscope? Usually someone will go off rushing to the sterile instrument set store and say, oh yeah, here it is, here it is. And so in that scenario, you've got an immediate suggestion to say, well look, it would be a lot better if you put this telescope on the main tray. Otherwise, when you're in that emergency situation in the middle of the night and the staff that don't know the set are trying to use it in theatres and there's no telescope, they possibly don't know that there should be a telescope. So therefore, if the telescope is on the set, then it's a little bit more obvious. But you can identify what length the scope they have versus what length optical forceps they have. And we didn't touch on this previously, but these are the shorter optical forceps that go with the 30cm telescope. They are largely redundant to us. In order to keep things simple, we do try and keep with the longer equipment. So if they have the shorter optical forceps on their sets, I'd suggest you make the suggestion to that customer to trade those in against the longer ones if they haven't already got them. The one caveat to that is that if they only have 26cm bronchoscope tubes, then they do only need the 30cm forceps. But if they have got the 30cm bronchoscope tubes, which most places do, then you must have the longer optical forceps. Otherwise, quite simply, those forceps aren't going to reach out of the end of that bronchoscope tube itself. Next step in laying your instrument kit out is to identify which of the multitude of accessories they have. So remember, this tube is becoming the endotracheal tube. You have a ventilator attached here. You've got to make these three ports airtight, otherwise you're going to have the air and the anaesthesia gases leaking out of here. So set the bridge apart. You're going to need the injection cannula. You're going to need the prism. The black adapters here you can ignore nowadays, but then you're going to need an instrument guide and a window plug, or the FluVog adapter, and that is the minimum number of accessories that you need. If any of those are missing, you've got to make a note and you've got to update the customer and quote them for those parts to be added. The other main recommendation that we have is, other than keeping the telescope on the actual set with the rest of the paediatric bronchoscopy equipment, is that it is very wise to have an extra telescope as a backup. As we have said before, it's very easy when removing this telescope, either on the forceps or when it's been used to introduce the bronch tube, and pull it out to the side. And if they do that, they're going to break the telescope, and that's going to make the rest of the procedure much more difficult, as they will have to try and eyeball down here and retrieve it with standard forceps. So once you've laid out the customer's own paediatric bronchoscopes, check their accessories, check their telescope and their optical forceps, you can then do the rest of the training. But you must identify which pieces are missing and advise the customer accordingly of what they are going to need to order to complete that kit. To that end, it is advisable to have our own demonstration kit available to use as a reference to show them why they need the prism and why they need these other adapters. Finally, with regard to the Karl Storz paediatric bronchoscopy range, it is no exaggeration to say that we have the most complete range of equipment for the various procedures associated with paediatric airways. I would say we have 95% of the market out there as far as the instrument sets in the various hospitals is concerned. That is in part due to the comprehensive nature of the range, but also the support that we do provide. Our only competitor in this field is a company called Richard Wolf. They have a very similar system, but a lot of it borrows product from their urology range, and it's not as comprehensive a kit as we have. The main obstacle, as far as the customer is concerned, is the fact that Richard Wolf do not support that product range very well. I think one of the most common requests for training that we get from customers these days is on the paediatric bronchoscopy equipment. The main reason for that is the fact that the equipment is generally not used routinely, and when it is used, it's used in anger and in a stressful situation. But we do support this product range very well via the upper endoscopy team.